You don't want it to be having too much profanity. And there was a couple times where I was like, oh, they did not put it there.
Yeah. Hello everyone, this is Mark Peterson again with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center, and today my favorite movie guest is Chad from the Hi Chad channel, and we're going to launch these two together, I think.
Yeah, we did kind of a mega reaction to Parasite.
Chad is a genius. This guy's a genius. We went to see the movie last night.
Yeah.
For me, that's second time around. So
yeah, second time for me as well.
And you see more things.
You for sure do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Certain things jump out. Like the idea of hammering a plan. They kept talking a plan. You don't have a plan. What's the plan? That kept coming up over and over.
And at the very end, the son talks about his plan.
Yeah.
And so that makes you think it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a plan he's got to save his dad and reunite his family. But like his dad kind of says, you're better off with no plan.
Yeah. And he's making this plan, and they have the fantasy of recapturing the house. Mm-hmm. And then it fades down to reality, where we are in the basement, where we started. Well, I do cultural backgrounds is the thing, and historical backgrounds. We don't have a history on this.
We don't, no.
It's not a historical piece, but I've got two cultural things that I want to talk about. One is the rating of it, because a lot of people don't like to go to our movies. Mm-hmm. I don't like to see graphic sex and nudity on the film. I don't like to see violence. You know, violence that fits the story is okay, but gratuitous,
unnecessary,
bloody, awful things, scatter movies. I don't like that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then bad language.
Yeah.
Well, this was sort of moderate on all three. No nudity.
Yeah.
But there was one sex scene. Yeah. And the violence is pretty violent.
The violence is graphic.
Yeah.
It's not the amount, it's how graphic it is.
Yeah. Pretty bloody.
Yeah.
And then the language. Mm-hmm. And I had this theory going into the second one that maybe the Americans put in subtitles, put in a few more bad words.
Yes.
On purpose to get an R rating.
Right.
Because Americans like to have an R rating if it's a so-called serious movie.
Yeah.
And so this time I was watching to see if there were real F words and phony F words.
Right.
We had a movie on campus one time that we showed, and it had 4 F words. Mm-hmm. But you look at it, 2 of them were real translations, and 2 of them were graphic things. For example, one of the phrases was, "Get out of here."
Yeah.
And they used the F word.
Right.
To do it. Maybe the rating in the Korean movie is less than the rating on the American side. The Korean movie is what we call a PG-15.
PG-15, okay.
But the American, the R is 17.
Is 17, right.
So I went to see the Korean movie. Mm-hmm. I prefer the 15.
Right. You saw the Korean version. You were good,
yeah. But it turns out the subtitles are really interesting because they used graphic words accurately, and then a couple of times they put it in when they didn't need to. But there were other times where they didn't put it in where they said it.
Yes, that was interesting. We had kind of had this conversation before, and I was mostly running around operating the cameras, so I wasn't watching the whole movie. But at some point, I was paying attention to it, right? Because I've invited a lot of people there. You're aware of that, right? You don't want it to be having too much profanity. And there was a couple times where I was like, oh, they did not put it there.
Yeah.
And then there was other times they did put it where I was like, that wasn't exactly what they're saying.
You know, there's a website in America where you can look up the ratings on a movie, and it'll count how many of which bad words.
That's interesting.
And my wife looks at that because she's got a tolerance level. 1 or 2 is okay, but 21.
Yeah.
This was 21.
This was 21.
21.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And for her, that's over the top.
Yeah.
But given the fact that some were really phony swear words and some were the swear words they didn't get, it probably washes out about the same.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't know if this is still the case, but I know what it used to be is in a PG-13 movie, which in the way I see it, we generally have PG, PG-13, and R. Those are kind of your 3 categories.
Right.
For a PG-13, generally, in the past, they've only allowed a maximum of 1 F word. Right. If it's more than that, it's almost an automatic R.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the case, but that's what it used to be.
Yeah. I don't know. They change a little. The society changes over time.
Yeah, for sure.
Then there's the higher level, the NC-17, which is really extreme. Which
Most of those don't make it to
No,
theaters.
and movie producers don't want that because
nobody will see it.
Restricted audiences. So that was the one thing, is how the rating system worked. The other thing I started thinking about before we went to see the movie, it runs in your head for a while.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to talk about is slavery.
Okay, interesting.
Because everyone talks about the social class difference.
For sure.
But historically, I've looked at slavery in Korea a lot and in America. And I think one of the gut-wrenching reasons that movie has such an appeal and such force to it is it really touches on not just social class, but the histories of slavery.
Okay.
And the reason I'm thinking of that is slavery is enforced by violence.
Oh, okay.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
It's chains, it's whips, it's beatings, and it's violence. You cannot have slavery without violence. And I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about the 12 Years a Slave, the story.
I haven't seen that. I know that, like, I've read up on the movie, but I haven't seen that.
That's a great little movie. It's about a free black man who's tricked into a situation where he's kidnapped and sold into slavery down in the deep south. He's in a border state, he's in Maryland or somewhere.
Yeah.
And he's a free man.
Yeah.
And he's never been a slave.
Right.
And
he's tricked into it.
He's tricked into it, and it takes him 12 years to break out because he just can't go up to the owner and say, "Hey, this is a trick."
Yeah, I'm not a slave.
I'm not a slave. I'm not really a slave.
Right.
Because, you're just not treated that way. And he was on the edge of violence all the time, and that's what kept him from running off and taking a chance. So I've been thinking the violence of the movie sort of underscores the social class difference, which says to me this harkens back to slavery. Now I'm going to do a thing on slavery one of these days, comparing American slavery and Korean slavery. But at the outset, what would you say, just as an ordinary person, what would you say is the difference between Korean slavery and American slavery?
Man, it's been a long time since we talked about it, and I think you talked about this in your class.
Maybe I did.
But it's that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in Korea, it was a social class thing, right? Because they're all Koreans. Koreans putting in other Koreans into slavery.
So it's the same
It's the same race, right?
Whereas
in
in America,
we went to another country and we outsourced that, and we brought them.
Brought in another
race. Yeah.
So my question in that regard is, which is worse? Which is
right?
better?
I'd say they're equally terrible.
Yeah. There's no goodness in enslaving your own people.
Yeah.
As there's no goodness in enslaving
other people. It's and even if you we took a trip out to Ghana a few years ago, and I've been to the slave castles, which is another subject, very sobering experience.
Yeah.
But the people basically for rounding up the slaves and giving them to the Americans, the British, whoever else. I mean, those were African people. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a component of that too.
Yeah.
And no matter which way you look at it, it's awful.
Yeah, it's an awful thing. So, in a sense, that the movie brought out, strangely, a week afterward, I started thinking, this is sort of it's not just social class, but historically, this is hearkening back to that lower class living in the basements. In the old days, they would have been slaves. One thing I found about American slavery is the owners think that they're wonderful people, and they think they're taking good care of their
exactly.
slaves.
One thing that was shocking about the slave castles in Ghana, above, so you can go in and look where they held the prisoners, essentially your future slaves. Directly above it is a church, and they would pray on top of it, thinking how great they are.
Yeah, and slave owners in the South use the church, keep people in line, get them worshiping and feeling good about themselves. Yeah. So I have a question then, which is better, and the answer is neither is better. Right. And I've got a Chinese character phrase that I use to describe the two slaveries. It's Te Dong So I, which is mostly the same and not much different.
Okay.
Which is the opposite of the way most Americans and most Koreans look at it. Most Americans beat themselves up about how awful they were about slavery. Yeah. Most Koreans let it slide like, well, we weren't so bad.
Yeah.
In reality, I think that both are wrong. For example, slavery was illegal in America after 1801. Importation of slaves.
Okay.
If you had a slave, you could keep him till 1862, till the Emancipation Proclamation. 1860.
Yeah.
But you couldn't import any new slaves.
Interesting.
So you had to be nice to your slaves. You had to breed your slaves in order to. And there are a lot of interesting similarities. What did the Southern slave owners call their slaves? They called them their people. Which is kind of ironic because they treated them like they weren't people.
Right.
But the slave owner talking to others, how are your people?
Interesting.
Right. So anyway, I dredged up all these research that I've done about slavery in the past when I looked at the movie. So I've got those two insights on the movie that struck me. One was the language and how the rating was handled a little bit differently, a little softer in Korea and a little harder in America.
Yeah.
And yet I think the appeal to both people is it touches a nerve deep down that if it's not directly slavery, it's the way we treat other people.
Yeah, because it's the same thing, and maybe now it's not violence, maybe now it's money. So, okay, at the very end, when they're at the child's birthday party, Mr. Pak says to Mr. Kim, like, hey, you're getting paid extra for this. Like, don't complain.
Yeah.
Type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the difference. It's not a violence thing, but it's kind of like, hey, know your place because I'm the guy who pays you.
Yeah, it's exploitation for sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
You need this money.
Right.
Because you're poor and we're going to help you out.
Exactly.
So, well, anyway, those are some of the things we were thinking about.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's a whole different mood to see it a second time.
Yeah, it is.
I think when I saw it this time, since I knew the shocking parts coming, there's a little more sadness involved for me.
Yeah.
It was more sad watching this time around.
We're not getting paid for this. For the movie ought to thank us for telling people, don't see it once, see it twice.
See it twice, that's all right.
It's got some depth and it's a great show. Anyway, those are some of the things that we were thinking about.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.